Hey everybody, Joe Diesel here. Welcome back to Half Hour Power.
And this is Jeremy Riley.
Hey Jeremy, how you doing this week?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great too. Looking forward to this show. As you know, we're doing a two-part Dracula show. And we are going to talk about, in this section, we're going to talk about a little bit about the book, a little bit about some of the movies that have been made based on the book, you know, that tell the book story. We're not really going to talk about the ones that just have Dracula in them. So, all right, let's get started. What do you think, Jeremy?
I think it sounds good. Let's do it.
Very well. Well, it's Halloween season here. This is our two-part October ending spectacular show. So I couldn't think of a better topic right now to go on. And vampires are really hot right now. I mean, you got television show after television show. I mean, you got movies and movies coming out of the woodwork everywhere. There's comic books. There's more books. I mean, it's almost endless now, isn't it, Jeremy?
Oh, God, yeah, they're everywhere.
I mean, anywhere you want, there they are. Well, something's happened, and we can't get into a lot of this because I don't know if you can actually pinpoint exactly where that turn was. But somewhere along the way, Dracula has been made into a sort of a tragic hero, sort of a romantic lead. I don't know where that happened. You think we can pinpoint that, Jerry? That's hard, isn't it? That would be hard to really just pin that down, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. Though I would say that a lot of it had to do with Anne Rice and her books humanizing the vampires in the early 90s. And
well, even in her book, Interview with the Vampire, they're still vampires. They're still vampires. They're not running around glittering in the sunlight and playing baseball in the treetops.
But I think that's one of the first ones
stuff
we're
like
getting,
that.
you know, to a point of view. There's magic.
Because Interview with the Vampire, that came out in the late 70s.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I can see how that could take some of the blame for that. I can definitely see that. Okay, so let's hop into Dracula now. Dracula was written by who, Jeremy? Who wrote that?
Oh, I don't know. Let me think here. Bram Stoker.
Yeah, that's right. Do you remember when that book came out? I don't remember. I don't think I was born yet, but
yeah, Bram Stoker's Dracula came out around 1897 was when it was published, I believe. It's been a while.
That's right. That's right. That came out there in 1897, and he had done quite a few years of research on this subject. He went and studied European folklore and all kinds of stuff. And I'll just get this out of the way right now. If you haven't read that book, you should read that book. I mean, if you've seen a movie and it's based on the book and you think you know the story, you know the basic bit of the story. But the book is such a... I mean, I reread the book for this show, and it takes its time to build and unfold, and when it does, it gets so beautiful when it opens up. What do you think about that, Jeremy? I mean, you went back through the book for this, too.
I think it's a very fun book. It's everything in it is done from the point of view of, like, newspaper articles and journals and phonograph recordings, and it's all pieced together from different points of view of characters. And I think it's a very inventive book, and as a result, it's also a very fun and enjoyable book to read.
Yeah, showing Stoker a very versatile writer.
Indeed, it does. And very ahead
exactly.
of his.
Yeah. Yeah, so, well, how was this book received, Jeremy? Was this like a instant smash hit, flying off the shelves type book, like Stephen King gets to be now?
I would say that it was a popular story, but I wouldn't necessarily say it was considered a classic. I think a lot of people look down their nose at it as kind of a trashy kind of a guilty pleasure, a trashy book to read when you have nothing else to read, nothing of importance to read or something, just something to pass the time with, is what they saw the book as at the time.
Yeah, it's a rollicking good pass the time book.
Well, it is, still is, definitely.
So Bram Stoker. Let me see. I got just this tidbit here. Bram Stoker was a sickly little man when he was a child, and one of the happiest moments of his childhood was when his mother would sit by his bed and tell him the myths and legends of Ireland. So, Ireland, we know banshees and all kinds of other things over there. So he must have heard some great stuff. It really charged up his imagination as a child. Because Dracula is not the only book he's got. He had quite an output. Ken Russell made, I don't know how popular the film is, but I watched it. So that right there must make it super popular. The Lair of the White Worm was actually Stoker. And he based that on a folklore and myth also. That's for another show, if we ever wanted to go into all that. We're going over Dracula. So Jeremy, this book, this comes out. It's not really a huge smash hit, but one of the things I found interesting was Stoker really wanted to adapt this for the stage.
Yep, he did.
And he was actually the manager of a super popular actor at that time. Do you remember his name?
I don't, unfortunately.
Okay, his name was Henry Irving. And that's okay, because it's kind of a weird name. And this guy's never been in any movie, so there's really not. I tend to think now we remember him because Bram Stoker. So it's kind of funny that he was super popular then, but
he looked down
who's going to remember him? I mean, I'm sure there are people that do, but I mean, I only know of him because of Bram Stoker.
Exactly.
But the look of Dracula, the basic facial features, if you read the book and then look at pictures of Irving, they look very similar. I mean, you and I were talking about that earlier today. And Irving, super popular actor, just laughed at Stoker when he suggested they do that. Couldn't do much for his self-esteem there, could it?
Well, Stoker apparently based the character of Dracula off of, the physical characteristics at any rate, off of Irving, and wanted him to play him in a stage version of his novel. And of course, he looked down his nose at it. He's like, I'm an actor. I will not play this piece of trashy character you based on me.
Yeah. It's not Shakespeare. You got to wait 400 years for that, Mr. Stoker. Yeah, I mean, we don't really know exactly what he said, but yeah, Stoker actually did write a stage adaptation, and that never happened. So anyway, let's move up here a little bit here. We're getting into, let's pop into the 20s there, where finally somebody gets an authorized adaptation, stage play. Hamilton Dean is his name. He writes the stage play, and they do it for the traveling show. They did touring show, I guess, not really traveling. But I'm not really into theater, so I'm going to misspeak on that. At any rate, anyway, they get the play going. Now, the play, this is interesting, as you go back and look at that, the play really is where we get our vision of Dracula today, the one that we know. All the, the tuxedo, the cape, the basic structure, and maybe I'm jumping ahead just a little bit because this is really closely tied to the 1931 Dracula. So we'll jump over to what year do you think Dracula actually first appeared on screen, Jeremy?
Well, I mean, I'm sure that we both know the answer to that question. We've both done our research. His very first appearance, as a lot of people think it may be Nosferatu, which came out in 1922, but they would be wrong to think that, because there is a 1921 movie called Dracula's Death, a Hungarian horror movie. now lost. Believed lost, I should say. It's believed to be lost now. No one knows where it is, where to find it. You know, they're still searching for it.
Yeah, and, exactly. There's a few still shots that you can find, and the basic plot, doesn't really follow the book. But the basic plot is about a woman who experiences frightening visions after visiting an insane asylum, and one of the inmates claims to be Count Dracula. Well, she has trouble determining if those visions are real or if they were nightmares. So, I mean, the movie sounds kind of interesting. I'd watch it.
It has a Captain Dr. Caligari vibe to it.
Yeah, exactly. So that one was made and is lost. And the next one you mentioned was Nosferatu, and that came out in 22. Now, who directed that?
Nosferatu was directed by F.W. Murnau, or Murnau, however you pronounce his name, Murnau.
Yep, that sounds about right there. So that one comes out, and they tried to change it enough so that they wouldn't have to pay the copyrights. Now, that was a bit of a shady area still at the time. We got to remember this, translating a book to a screen was still relatively new back then, and the copyright issues. Well, she wasn't even asked, and that really made her mad. So she sued them to get that destroyed, and rightly so. You know, her husband is dead. That's something he created, and they never asked her. So you kind of wonder if they had actually asked her if she would have allowed it. But they didn't, so she wanted it destroyed. So that one, I really like that one. What do you think about that one, Jeremy?
Nosferatu is one of my all-time favorites. It is a classic, and you know, a lot of people will never watch it, of course, because it's a silent movie. It's in black and white, and you know they don't like that because they want their shiny special effects CGI action every 5 seconds movie. But Nosferatu is a very visually disturbing film. It's beautifully the way they do with the shadows. The German expressionist films of the time in general. The way they play the shadows and the props and the makeup effects, and a very eerie, a very different Dracula from any other Dracula that's ever been done on the screen.
Yeah, exactly. What I find interesting, one of the bits I find interesting about it is the look of the vampire, and they call him Count Orlok in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
He is very close to what Stoker actually describes in the book.
Yep.
I mean, I think the biggest thing is he's not old in the beginning.
No.
But, I mean, he's got pointed ears, too, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm. He never changes, really. He has that rat face features going on through the entire thing with the buck teeth and everything. Yeah,
and he looks great. His movements are... He's a very creepy guy.
Long fingers.
Oh, yeah, he looks great, and he looks a lot like the monster Stoker wrote about in his book, the monster Stoker created.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think we know that movie has survived. Some prints of it has survived, so we can still see it.
Thank God.
Which is good for us.
Definitely.
Anyway, but let's jump up to the next version. Now, that was the Universal Dracula, released in 1931. And that one's notable for a few reasons. It is really the first sound vampire movie, and I think it's the first supernatural movie also in sound, and one of the first supernatural movies in, of the sound era, or if not the first. So there's a couple of things. Anything else about that, Jeremy, that you found interesting when you were looking things up?
That's the 1931, based on the play by Hamilton Dean and John Balderston, directed by the extremely talented Todd Browning, who's best known for doing the silent films. The film is very notable. Of course, this is the first one, like you said, to do the a talking Dracula, which they also borrowed a bit from Nosferatu, because I know the screenwriters actually studied the Nosferatu movie before they did the Dracula movie. And I like the scene in there in the original Nosferatu when the Harker character pricks his finger and he's bleeding out of the finger, and Count Orlok is attracted to the blood on his finger but then repelled by the cross hanging from Harker's neck. That's taken over into the Dracula 1931 version as well. They borrowed that from the movie because that's not in the book at all.
Yeah, that's right. They did get a print, and they did study that. But right now we're up against a hard break, so we'll get back into that in just a minute. Do you long to own a significant piece of real estate that has a great place in history? Are you tired of being told that commemorative plates is all the history you can own? Well, then we have a deal for you. Call this toll-free number and place your order for a box of Dracula's dirt. That's right, a box of Dracula's dirt. This is soil from the native land of Dracula, the king of vampires. Own a piece of dirt that Dracula actually slept on. That's right. This soil is real dirt, packaged in boxes exactly like the ones Dracula took with him to London. This dirt is also rich in nutrients. Use it to grow a crop of garlic and wolfsbane. Order now and get a box made from wood harvested from the forest surrounding Castle Dracula. Dracula's dirt will become a cherished family heirloom that will give and give and give. Order Dracula's dirt now and receive a chance to win a free luxury cruise from Varna to England on the Demeter. Dracula's dirt, Dracula's dirt! Warning, dirt is not for snorting, freebasing, or building dirt castles. All right, and we're back. So we were talking a little bit about the 31 Dracula and how they were studying the Nosferatu print. And that's one of the other interesting things about that movie is there was also a version being made simultaneous on the same sets after they wrapped. Do you remember what that one's called?
It was the Dracula, the Spanish version.
That's right, that's the Spanish version, and they were doing that because dubbing at the time, the technology wasn't quite up yet. So what they would do is they would just make other versions with that cast, with the Spanish-speaking cast. So now the notable thing about that is a lot of times people will say, well, the Spanish version looks better than Browning's version, and it is better. Well, one of the things that happened was those guys, since they were shooting after they were done shooting, they got to watch the rushes. So they got to actually sit there and study what Browning had done, or Carl Freund, whatever they had done. They got to study and go, well, I can do better than that. Let's do this. They actually got to look at it and go, oh, they did this? Well, the heck with that, we're going to do this. And it's going to look a lot better if we do this. So, what can you say about that? But have you seen the Spanish version?
I have not seen the stage version, no. I guess I've seen the Dracula 1931, which is based on the stage version. In a way, maybe.
They use the exact same sets shooting the Spanish version, and I've seen it, and I like I think the pacing is better in the 31 version. I think that one moves a little faster. But that's definitely something to check out. It's just interesting, two different takes on the same script at the same time. That's kind of interesting. Now, let's move up a little bit. Then, obviously, you had the Hammer remake of Dracula, the horror of Dracula with Christopher Lee. Then let's come up to Jess Franco. I think we all know who Jess Franco is. He made a version of Dracula with Christopher Lee. Did you get to see that one?
With Christopher Lee? No, I haven't seen that one, I don't think.
Now, that one is, it starts out where Christopher Lee is an old man. He's got gray hair. He's got a mustache, like Dracula's supposed to have, and he's dressed all in black like Dracula's described. And for the most part, about the first 20 minutes of it is a fairly faithful adaptation of the beginning of the book. Anyway, then it goes downhill from there. not to say that it's a totally bad film. I mean, it's always fun to watch Christopher Lee as Dracula. And it's got Herbert Lom as Van Helsing and Klaus Kinski as Renfield. And we'll get to why that's funny if you haven't already picked up on that in a couple of minutes. Well, that brings us up to 1973. The next version would be a version by the creator of Dark Shadows, Dan Curtis, with Jack Palance as Dracula, 1973. Now, I found that interesting because I haven't seen this version. Have you seen it?
I have not seen it, no.
I haven't seen it either. I haven't been able to find it yet. And I guess the Internet would make that easier to find it and order it. But I'm still... I still like to run up and buy them sometimes. But anyway, as I was looking at it, I've always heard about this one, and Jack Palance's Dracula is interesting. I like Jack Palance. What do you think about that, Jack Palance's Dracula?
I think you make a pretty good Jack Palance. I mean, you make a pretty good Dracula. Jack Palance has the face for it. He was in a plane crash in World War II, which tore his face completely off his skull, and he had to have it surgically re-grafted onto his face. So, he had that strange, creepy appearance that just was perfect for monsters. I'm expecting him to play more monsters.
Yeah. Now, well, after he played Dracula, he was asked to play Dracula a few times and do some things, and he said no to them all. So, now this was a TV version. It was made for television, so there you go. I've seen trailers of it. It looks pretty interesting. I'd watch it. But that's one I'm going to have to go back and find and watch. Now that brings us up to the 77 BBC version of Dracula. Did you get to see that one?
I have not seen that one either, no. I've seen parts of it, but not all of it.
Yeah, there's clips on YouTube and stuff like that, and that's got Louis Jordan as Dracula, or Louis, however you want to say it. This one is a really careful, faithful adaptation to the book. I mean, it's got a lot in there that I haven't seen in other versions. It's got Mr. Swales in it. You know who Mr. Swales is, right, Jeremy?
Mr. Swales. Can't say that I do.
He's the old man that Mina and Lucy talk to when they're sitting there in the churchyard at Whitby.
Oh.
Yeah, and he tells them those stories, and he tells them how gravestones are lies, and it's kind of a fun part of the book because he's actually a victim of either Dracula or the escaped wolf. It's not really made clear who it is that kills him, but Mina finds him dead. But I found Louis Jordan. He was a good Dracula. He was creepy at the same time, monstrous, sort of dangerous. It is a BBC television movie, so it is 77, so you got some early video effects in it. And if they remade that one from that script, you might be onto something there. 'Cause one of the main things they did was they did combine Quincy Morris with Arthur Holmwood, and he's called like Quincy Holmwood. So Mina and Lucy are sisters, but other than that, everybody's there, and everybody does what they're supposed to be doing. Let's hop up to Frank Langella's Dracula.
Oh, yes.
So what's that one, Jeremy? You've seen that one.
Oh, yeah. That one was when they tried to reimagine the original 1931 Dracula. And an interesting comparison between the two is that Frank Langella and Bela Lugosi, both of them, as Dracula, never once have the canine teeth, the long teeth. They wanted their Dracula to be more romantic, more sexual, I suppose I should say. And Frank Langella, that was one thing he really wanted, but he wanted to sexualize Dracula. He wanted Dracula not to be the parasite monster that he is. He wanted him to be romantic and debonair and a gentleman and, all the stuff that we all know that Dracula isn't. He might hide behind it to some degree, but used like that.
Yeah, exactly. The stage play was revived there in the late 70s.
That's
and
right.
executive, the Universal guy saw it, and he saw the reaction of the crowd. It was a huge hit. It did really well.
Oh, yeah.
And they decided, well, we got to make this. So they got Langella. The cast is pretty good for the most part. I mean, you got Donald Pleasance as Seward. You had Laurence Olivier as Van Helsing.
The interesting note on that is they wanted Donald Pleasance to play Van Helsing, but he had just done Halloween, and he said, no, I already played a character like that who's going around chasing the monster. You know, I'd rather be the doctor.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but that one I found, it is based on the stage play, and an interesting tidbit about that is Universal has made 3 versions of Dracula that are supposedly based on the book. All 3 of them are based on the stage plays for the most part. You got 31 Dracula, Spanish Dracula, and Frank Langella's Dracula. So they really haven't done it yet, but there's good things about all of them. And this one in particular, set design, I think, is just outstanding in this one. I mean, the Carfax Abbey, the interiors, they look great.
The cinematography.
The cinematography is great. I love the look of it.
The muted colors, it has a kind of a golden look to it, the glow.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And Frank Langella is good for what they're doing with Dracula in that one. I mean, he did a good job with it. They made it an epic, sweeping romance.
Exactly,
but, that's always baffled me and probably will always baffle me as to how you can find Dracula an epic, sweeping romance. The score by John Williams is pretty good too. He's got that's a pretty good haunting little score there in that one.
Yeah, Williams is awesome though. Yeah, he does a great job.
Yeah, that brings us up to the 1992 Dracula.
Oh yeah.
That is what's that one called?
That one is called Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Why did they call it that?
He called it that because, Francis Ford Coppola said, his excuse is that any movie he does based on a book, he puts the author's name in with the title, sort of like Mario Puzo for The Godfather, and so on and so forth. And that's his excuse, but I think also he just wanted to differentiate himself from the other Dracula movies and make his, stand out as the one, the only, the true adaptation of the Dracula novel, is my belief, anyway, my understanding.
Yeah, that's about it. Now, I'm going to go back to the Dan Curtis film for just a little bit here in the last few minutes we have of the first part of the show, and bring up something that I really didn't know because I didn't see the Dan Curtis Dracula. The title of the Dan Curtis Dracula, when it was released in 1973, is actually Bram Stoker's Dracula. Did you know that?
I did not know that, no.
Yeah, so it was actually called Bram Stoker's Dracula. And it says here, doing my due diligence here, looking everything up, Francis Ford Coppola and Columbia Pictures purchased the rights to the title in the early 90s, the title being Bram Stoker's Dracula. Coppola, like Jeremy just said, he wanted to make it clear it was just to differentiate it from it. So they took the title, and I guess as a result, they had to change the title of their movie that came out in 1973 to Dan Curtis's Dracula, because if you go get that on DVD, the cover says Dan Curtis's Dracula, when the original title is Bram Stoker's Dracula. I don't know. That just kind of would irritate me if I made that movie and somebody said, well, you got to change your title. I know your movie's 20 years old, but you need to change your title because mine's going to be better than yours. I don't know that's what he said, but what the hell?
It's pretty much what you're implying. We took your title, we're using it, and you can't use it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to end this section of the show with the where I get that quote, Dracula, epic sweeping romance. It comes from James Hart, he says that I have always seen Dracula as an epic sweeping romance, and I don't know why you see it that way. And he says that after he'd read the book. He sees the book that way. Well, I guess if you see the book that way, your movie's going to be that way. But we'll get into that and a few other fun things in the next show. And thank you for being with us, and we hope you've enjoyed this. And maybe we've named some Dracula movies you haven't seen that you want to go see. Because I definitely found some that I haven't seen that I'll probably go back and watch. Any final thoughts on this first bit, Jeremy?
Just that Dracula is not a sweeping romance, at least on the original book. In the book, as with most movies, he's a bloodsucker, a parasite, feeding off of human beings, not whining and dining them, because, as we all know, Dracula never drinks wine.
All right, and with that, we'll see you here in a few more minutes. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Half Hour Power. This is Joe Diesel here.
This is Jeremy.
I think Jeremy's with us for this. There's Jeremy. Hey, Jeremy. So, this is... I'm sorry, what was that?
I'm with you in spirit.
Yeah. So, this is the second part of our end of October Halloween spectacular show Dracula segment. I think... Dracula's everywhere. We mentioned that a little bit, but I don't think we mentioned this, that there are more than 200 films that feature the character of Dracula that have been made, and he is second only to Sherlock Holmes for the most film appearances. And that is quite a large amount of films and quite a feat. I don't think Bram Stoker ever imagined that something like that would happen when he was writing this book. Especially after Henry Irving told him he didn't want to do it. What do you think about that?
I think it's pretty marvelous considering that Dracula, he doesn't appear in mirrors, doesn't appear on film and all this other stuff yet. He's made all these movies. It's a miracle.
Exactly right. Apparently celluloid will capture him, and the digital technology will, but the mirror is just too primitive, I guess. Right about that. Yeah. So we left off there talking a little bit about how Sony and Francis Coppola, or Columbia Pictures, bought the title of Dan Curtis's Dracula. Mm-hmm. Now, the other thing I found interesting when I was looking this up, looking at the basic plots of a lot of these movies, was the plot of Dan Curtis's Dracula. And what do you think I found there, Jeremy? You hadn't seen it, and but you had seen Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yep.
And one of the things that the screenwriter, James Hart, was saying was nobody has done the book, so one of the reasons he wanted to make the movie was to do the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a fair assessment. There's plenty book versions, a lot of them, varying degrees of success. They changed, we discussed some of that. They changed a few things around. Mm-hmm. So his version was supposed to be that's what it sounded like in interviews, the definitive version. Is that what you got from interviews with Mr. Hart, and especially when that movie was coming out?
Exactly. That's what he promised. He promised the version of Bram Stoker's Dracula, his actual novel, not like the play or some different cut up version of it. So yeah.
Yeah, and for the most part, when you watch that movie, it's pretty much there. But there's I'm going to pick these two plot threads, and I think you know what they are. And there's more that you could pick out, but I'm just going to pick out these main two plot threads that are nowhere to be found in the book. And we've talked a little bit about them in the first part, but Dracula is actually Vlad Tepes, the historical leader of Wallachia, and Mina is his reincarnated love. Now, those are not in the book.
No.
At all. Are they?
No, Stoker used the historical Vlad Tepes, Dracula, as window dressing. Basically, he discovered it after he'd already written the story, and I thought, well, this is interesting. I'll write that into the story as kind of to spice it up a bit, to give it a little bit of flair. But he never actually mentions in the book that Dracula is Vlad Tepes.
Yeah, exactly. If you do look at pictures of Vlad Tepes, he does sort of resemble Henry Irving, who I think in turn resembles Christopher Lee.
Exactly.
Just a little bit, because Christopher Lee actually did play. He's actually played Vlad Tepes in a documentary. But anyway, so those two plot threads, I thought those were brand new, never done before. And I thought it was interesting. I was like, oh, that's interesting, tapping in to the historical Vlad Tepes and putting that in there. That's interesting. And even the beginning of the movie, where Winona Ryder, who she commits suicide because she thinks Dracula's dead. Well, that's actually taken from a real story of Vlad Tepes. So even that was real. That's an actual real story that they put in there. But as I said, I thought that was new. And I thought, well, that hadn't been done before. So that's you give them a little bit of a pass. But as I'm looking this up and looking at plots of other movies, I'm reading the plot for Dan Curtis's Dracula, and guess what it has in there, Jeremy?
What's that?
I know. You're in such suspense, I can tell. Okay, there are two key elements in the Curtis film that separates it from other adaptations, making Dracula the historical Vlad the Impaler, and the reincarnation romance between Dracula and his dead wife. What the? What the?
So apparently Coppola's version of Dracula isn't so original after all.
No, it's not. I would have known that if I'd seen that version of Dracula before, and now more than ever I really want to see it. It's just one of those versions that I'd never picked up to see, but now I really want to see it quite a bit after reading that, because then you read interviews with James Hart, listen to interviews, and he says he read the book in 1977 and it had never been done. And I just want to read this quote from him. You and I were talking about this earlier, and I don't understand this. Okay, so he reads the book flying from France to New York in April of 77. And back home that night in New York, he became so overwroumed while reading that book that I threw it into my wardrobe and slammed that door. Later that night, around 2 a.m., my wife awoke to my face leering over her, watching her jugular pump seductively in her neck. I was hooked. I don't know what that means.
I think it means he's kind of screwed in the head. Pardon my French.
I mean, as I was reading the book again, there was never one point where I wanted to throw the book. Maybe he wanted to throw the book because he didn't think anybody had done it right. You know, we can give him the benefit of the doubt on that since we can't really ask him what he meant by that. You know, but I've never wanted to leer over my wife's neck with blood pumping. I don't know what any of that means. What do you think about that, Jeremy?
I'm thinking he's saying that he was so overwrought by the story that, it drew him in so much that it actually made him feel as if he himself was Dracula, and it actually made him himself want to be a vampire or, some kind of weird bunk like that, which I think he just made the whole thing up myself, just to make it sound, more interesting.
It does sound interesting, and it got guys like us to puzzle over it a little bit, but this actually comes from a foreword of sorts to the Dracula screenplay book, the shooting screenplay in Dracula the Film and Legend book. It's the shooting script. It's a neat book. It's got the script in there. It's got some really great pictures in there. It's got some good historical notes in there about the making of the movie.
That's a great.
I remember picking this up when that movie came out. But anyway, let's just move forward a little bit. So those two plot things aren't new, and they've been done before. which, as we were talking about, surprised me. Were you surprised when I told you about that plot?
Yeah, it did. It really surprised me because I had read that Hart started writing the script in 1977. And then I come to find out that this movie, that's very much, it's very similar to the script he wrote, came out in, 73? So there's really not that big of a gap between 73 and 77. And, it almost sounds like he plagiarized the story to me. That's just my own opinion.
Yeah, well, maybe he had seen it. Maybe he had seen it, and maybe he, subconsciously put it in. I don't know. But, yeah, we can't really tell, But anyway, let's go to the movie itself there. After getting that little bit out of the way, the movie itself. The reincarnated love. I rewatched that movie, and let's just talk about the reincarnation bit there. Mina is the reincarnated love. To me, that really takes away from the narrative of it. What do you think about that, Jeremy? Did you rewatch this recently?
Yeah. I feel that the love story is almost shoehorned in. It's never really worked for me, and that's mainly just because I feel it's the weakest part of the story itself. He's supposed to be this soulless creature, but they're trying to make him so tragic and longing for love again, to be with the woman he loves. And I'm like, he's this walking corpse. He's a parasite. This monster. He has no freaking feelings, yet for some unknown reason he's this. I'm trying to come down to say here is I just don't feel that the love story works in the overall structure of the Dracula.
Yeah. Yeah, it really doesn't. And before the movie came out, at the time, I read Dracula, because they were saying this is what this is. And I think when I saw it, I thought that too. Like, well, that's not in the book. But, I overlooked it at the time. Let me say this, too, about the movie. The movie is visually stunning.
Yes, it is.
The visuals are outstanding. A lot of the things in it are outstanding. I don't dislike the movie, but it just isn't as strong as it could have been. I don't think. One of the other things I found odd too is in the book, Dracula's an old man in the beginning, right?
Yep.
And in this movie, he's an old man in the beginning, but he doesn't look anything like he's described in the book.
Yeah, in the book, he has the long, wispy white mustache, and the hair's all black. And then in the movie, he looks like a kabuki actor.
Yeah, he's in all black. He's got a white mustache. He's got, there's no question what he is. Well, if you go and read the costume designer, they dressed him, I can sort of see dressing him in red and the Dracula crest and all that other stuff they did, but this stuff didn't make any sense. The costume designer's like, we put his hair up in a bun and wanted to play up the androgyny of the character. Well, there's absolutely nothing androgynous about Dracula. There's no question what he is. There's no question he's male. Harker knows he's a male. He says so extensively in his journal. And the only question Harker has is what's Dracula's intentions and what is he really? Is he a monster or what? That's his only question. His question isn't really, is he ambiguous? There's no ambiguosity about him. But what do you think about that, Jeremy?
I think that he is, like you said, he's very much a male. If you go by the movie itself, he's chasing after his lost love reincarnated, and that in itself, he's chasing after a female. He's male, chasing after a female. There's no androgynous about it. Especially if they're wanting him to be this love interest, this romantic love interest in the story. It doesn't help that you're making your romantic love interest an androgynous, well-faced old kabuki actor dressed all in red with a queer hairdo. It's
yeah. Yeah, and the thing about that strikes me as odd is they were touting at the time, this is the book. This is what the book is. Like, well, then why? It's so simple to put a mustache on him and dress him all in black and make him look like. It's so easy to do that, but they didn't do that. So that's one of the things I thought that's just odd things you think about after the fact.
Well, the
so one of the other bits I want to talk about, and I think about this in particular this movie, is they did use all the characters in their right spots, right? I mean, every character is there, especially the vampire hunters. That's a good bit, the vampire hunters. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, Jeremy?
It actually has all of the vampire hunters for the first time in any Dracula movie. You know, they have Jonathan Harker, Van Helsing, Jack Seward, Arthur Homeward, Quincy Morris, and, of course, Mina Harker. All the vampire hunters for the very first time are together hunting Dracula. I mean, that part they got right. That is the best part, I felt, of the movie because it's the closest to the book.
Yeah, and it's something we really haven't seen in a Dracula movie. We've seen 2 or 3 of the hunters, but not all of them.
They usually either delete characters or marry them together into one character, and, you know, they have like 2 or 3 of them running around doing something.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And now we are up against the break, so we'll see what's happening next. Do you have an insatiable appetite for consuming flies? Do you think that eating flies will give you more life? Do you use sugar to attract flies so that you can eat them? Do your friends call you fly eater behind your back or to your face? Then you need to attend Renfield's Fly Eaters Academy. That's right, Renfield's Fly Eaters Academy. At this elite school, you will learn how to get the most out of collecting flies and consuming flies. You'll learn Renfield's secret of how to feed the flies you catch to spiders, and how to feed those spiders to sparrows, and then how to feed the sparrows to cats. You'll also get delicious recipes for cooking up that cat so you can make the most out of the lives you've collected. Renfield's Fly Eaters Academy. If you're not a madman but a sane man fighting for your soul, then call now as class size is limited. Renfield's Fly Eaters Academy. Warning, Renfield's Fly Eaters Academy may be overrun by rats. Rats. Thousands of them. Millions of them. All filled with red blood. All right, we're back here. Now, we were talking there about Bram Stoker's Dracula and some of the things that it got right, some of the things that it got wrong. And actually, unfortunately, with any book translation to the screen, they're going to have to change some things and take some things out, or these movies would be just ginormous in their running time. Wouldn't they?
It would be, definitely.
Yeah, so let's get into a little bit about some of the characters that they could probably do better with when they do them. Now, we were talking about the characters they never use, but let's talk about 2 of the characters that are always in the movies, but they seem to be misused or are just window dressing. And we wanted to get into that of Renfield and Van Helsing. Let's start with Renfield here a little bit. What do you think about Renfield, Jeremy?
Renfield usually in the movies, he either goes in lieu of Harker to Dracula's castle. They use him for some reason instead of Harker going to the castle, and that's where he's driven mad. And then, like in Bram Stoker's Dracula, 1992 version, he's the predecessor of Harker. He goes before Harker does, and he goes insane, and so then they send Harker in his stead. And it's usually in the book, he's just an insane man that Dracula happens upon and uses. And it's a product of, in the book, Dracula uses his insanity in order to gain what he needs. Whereas in the movies, it's usually the other way around. It's usually Dracula drives Renfield insane.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if I've ever seen it that way in the movies. I mean, the 77 BBC version they did a pretty good job with it, but there are certain things done with Renfield as I was going back through the book that I was thinking, I've never seen that in a movie before. That is awesome. And in particular, the scene that was really standing out to me was when Renfield's killed. You remember how that goes down in the book?
In the book, he's killed fighting Dracula, trying to stop him from, I believe, going after Mina and the others. And he tries to fight Dracula off, and then Dracula ends up killing him.
Yeah, that is a great scene in the book, and I don't think I've ever seen it that way in a movie. Even Coppola's movie, if I recall correctly, Coppola's movie, Dracula comes up there, enters in Renfield's cell as Mist, and kills him. And what does he say? Renfield, you betrayed me.
Yeah, because Renfield told him to keep away.
He did what?
Yeah, Renfield told Mina. When Mina came to see him, Renfield told her to run away. I pray that I will never see you again, and tells her to flee, flee the master. And so she does. So then, of course, comes in there basically as an afterthought. You betrayed me. Oh, here, you're dead. You move on,
Yeah, it does sort of play as an afterthought in that movie. And it would have been a lot more interesting. It would have taken a much more effort to have him actually fight him.
Exactly.
And there's that great scene after where they try to help Renfield. He's going to die because Dracula, he threw him around the room, and I think he broke his back, didn't he?
Yeah, broke his back. And he's laying there.
He smashed up his face, dented his brain, and what else?
Yeah. And so basically cracked the skull open. He's laying there, and Van Helsing is able to revive him and keep him alive long enough to interrogate him. And, of course, and then when Renfield tells them what happened, that he's going after Mina, they abandon him and leave him there, and so he dies alone, just laying there in the middle of the cell.
Yep. Yeah, it is sad.
Yep.
It's sad. Yeah, but they find, so they go up there and they find Dracula with Mina, and he is forcefully having her drink from him, right?
Yes, he's forcing her. It's none of this, take me away from all this stuff. Oh, let me drink your blood and become like you. No, it's none of that. It's, she doesn't want to drink his blood, but he forces her.
Yeah, and there's no romance about any of that. And if I recall right from the book, he only went after Mina because they went to Carfax and desecrated to him. They desecrated his boxes so he couldn't sleep in them anymore.
Mm-hmm. It's basically a revenge thing. Like, you mess with me, I'm going to mess with you. Look what I just did. Up yours,
Yeah, exactly. So he goes up there, forces her to do that, and that brings us to Van Helsing. One of the things I found interesting as I was going through the book again was Van Helsing, in a lot of the movies, he is portrayed as sort of a know-it-all, I know everything type thing. All the answers, I know all these answers. This is a vampire, we're going to go after him. That's the size of the do this. Well, vampire isn't. I think the first time vampire is actually spoken in the book is when the newspaper man is interviewing the zookeeper, and he talks about vampire bats that might have been brought in the country. But Van Helsing isn't that way at all in the book. He goes through so much trouble to explain to Seward and the others that what's happening. He wants them to understand exactly what's happening. And he doesn't know what's happening all the time either, because he goes back to Holland and he consults a friend of his. I think his name was Arminus, wasn't it?
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, he's consulting with him because he's the guy that knows all that stuff. And Van Helsing even says in the book in a few places, we're going to start with folklore and go from there, when they finally get up there. Like, with the garlic, things like that. He's like, well, this is in folklore, so we're going to try it. We don't know if it's going to work. We're going to try it. So, because usually there's some basis in truth there. Mm-hmm. Is there anything you found about, going back through the novel, about Van Helsing and the way he's portraying characters that maybe you hadn't seen before or surprised you?
Well, he's a lot more subtle in the book than he is in, say, Bram Stoker's Dracula, where he's, laughing and horsing around, carrying on constantly. In the book, he's more of a combination of modern science and the old superstitious beliefs. What works for Dracula in the story is he's from the old Gothic setting, the old country, where it's all steeped in superstition and folklore and all that. And then he comes to Victoria, London, or England, Victoria, England, and everything's new. They're going into the new age. They have the phonograph, they have the typewriter, blood transfusion, all this modern stuff. And that's why he's able to prey on them so easily, because they're forgetting the old ways or shunning it. Anything that doesn't play into their own modern belief system is, they don't want to believe it, like Dr. Seward doesn't, the student of Van Helsing. And so when Lucy is infected by Dracula, they don't know what's going on, so they call him Van Helsing. And Van Helsing's able to bridge that gap. He's able to tell them, look, we need to look at all of the evidence, and I mean all of the evidence, not just all the modern scientific facts and everything. We need to look back at the superstitious stuff, because he had that open mind of bridging both the modern science and the superstitious folklore beliefs. And he goes about it in a scientific way, of course.
Yeah. Exactly. That's very well said. I don't think Van Helsing is really portrayed that way. A lot at all, hardly at all. But there's a lot of great stuff in the book where he's talking to Seward and trying to get him to understand what that is. I mean, he takes him down there and shows him Lucy's grave, and it's empty. And he says, Seward says, well, there were grave robbers. So he's like, okay, well, we'll come back and see if she's here in the daytime. And they go back, and there she is. So, and there's a lot of stuff like that in the book where he's trying to make sure that they understand what's happening. And it's never just this is what's happening, and this is what it is, and this is what we're doing.
Yeah, he doesn't just out and out say, hey, look, it's a vampire, because, then they're just like, oh, yeah, you're a loon, get out of here.
Yeah, exactly. And they all get to understand that that's what that is, and that's what they need to do. Well, we're coming close here to the end, and I wanted to get into this next bit. Also, we were discussing earlier what we thought our favorite actors that play these roles. So let's start Dracula. What about you?
To me, it'll always be Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee is the best Dracula, in my opinion. Like you said, he looks a lot like Henry Irving, and which I thought was interesting since, Bram Stoker based Dracula on Henry Irving, and Christopher Lee actually resembles him a bit, which is interesting.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. It'd be Christopher Lee for me as well. He, if he was really given the right script that was really, really closer, he would have been a lot better. I mean, not that all of his movies are bad that he played Dracula in, but he's always good to watch in. I mean, if the overall movie is bad. Let's go next to Van Helsing.
Van Helsing is a toss-up for me. I really enjoy Anthony Hopkins' version of him because he's actually the closest to the character from the book, even if he does kind of overdo it a bit. But also Peter Cushing is a really good version of Dracula, a very good version of Van Helsing, even though he plays Van Helsing as more of a stiff-necked Englishman, more starch color and all that, while Anthony Hopkins' version is actually closer to the actual Dutch character from the story. It's Dutch, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Peter Cushing, but for me it was a hard one also for that one because there's bits about each one I've seen play Van Helsing that I've liked. But I'm going to go with Peter Cushing. So we'll go next to Renfield.
Renfield, yes.
So did you have any actor that you thought did the best with Renfield?
Well, Renfield is really hard to beat Dwight Frye's interpretation of him in the original 1931 Dracula. I mean, he pretty much set the bar for anyone that plays Renfield after that. And Tom Waits, of course, is a close second.
Yeah. I go with Dwight Fry also. If you haven't seen that, go watch the 31 Dracula, because Dwight Fry is awesome in that. And we're getting really, really close to the end. So now we will get to the moment. What do you think, for you, is the best film version of Dracula?
The 1958 Hammer version of Dracula, starring Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing.
All right. That's a great choice. I'm going to go with the BBC version, the 1977 version. That, like I said, it could be a little bit more cinematic, and if they made it today, they probably would do that. But it's got a lot in there, a lot of little details from the book that I don't see in a lot of the movies, and I thought the cast was fairly good. And it's a little bit stiff here and there, but it's worth checking out if you haven't seen that. And we're coming up to the end here. Any final thoughts, Jeremy?
Yes. If you haven't read the book, read the book. If you haven't seen the movies, watch the movies. They're great. Happy Halloween. Oh, and today marks the anniversary of Vincent Price's death 20 years ago. It's hard to believe.
Yeah, that is hard to believe. That is, rest in peace, Vincent Price. Continue to. He brought us lots of great, memorable movies. And that's great parts, great pieces of my childhood and yours.
Definitely.
Yeah, so, just second what Jeremy said. If you haven't read the book, go read the book. It's a great read. It's entertaining throughout, and it's very interesting to see the difference between how it gets translated onto the screen or even onto the stage play and what's actually in the book. So we hope you've enjoyed our little trek through Dracula, the book and the movies, and we will see you next week. And hopefully, if Jesse's exorcism has taken, he will be back with us. All right. We'll see you next time.